Good morning, everyone. This is NWS Columbia meteorologist Steve LaVoie coming to you with a weather update on the incoming winter storm. Overall, our messaging has not changed from the last update. We have an ice storm warning that goes into effect today for much of our forecast area. That includes the cities of Columbia and Augusta, with a winter weather advisory in effect elsewhere, including the city of Orangeburg. The main story continues to be the threat of freezing rain, which could lead to ice accumulation everywhere, and significant icing, which we're defining as a quarter of an inch of ice or greater within the ice storm warning itself. And so if you're living in one of the counties that are in dark purple, you are currently under an ice storm warning. That'll go into effect at 1 p.m. this afternoon. So our primary area of concern is going to be I-20 and points off to the north and west. And so those areas have the greatest potential of seeing at least a quarter of an inch of ice, which could lead to isolated power outages and difficult travel. And the counties in the lighter purple are in the winter weather advisory. So we do not have confidence that you'll see at least a quarter of an inch of ice, but you could still see some ice accumulation. That could lead to at least some tricky travel and maybe a few power outages as well in the areas under the winter weather advisory. And so at this point in the game, we're moving from the day before in our storm planning timeline to during and after. And so at this point, you will still have an opportunity today, Saturday, to go out and get any last minute supplies you may need. And at this point, if you haven't any already, if you have any plans for Saturday night and especially into Sunday, perhaps even Monday morning, you want to adjust those plans appropriately and have multiple ways to receive NWS warnings in case your power does go out. So that would include a portable radio or a NOAA weather radio, which would not run on electricity. And if you do have any pets, make sure you bring them indoors for the duration of the storm. Check on your family and neighbors as the storm progresses. Make sure you're in contact with them. And then if you do lose power and you're relying on alternate heat sources, make sure everything is properly ventilated. That includes, again, make sure you're watching your candles. If you have any space heaters, make sure you're giving them enough space. And then if you're using generators, make sure they're outside of your house and at least 20 feet from your home. This is the latest NWS forecast for freezing rain amounts. And so you can see that the highest potential for significant ice continues to be along and points north and west of Interstate 20. And so we are seeing that potential for Lincoln, McCormick, Edgefield, parts of Aiken, Saluda, Lexington, Richmond, parts of Sumter County, Lee. Then we move up into Newberry, Fairfield, and then Kershaw, Chesterfield, and especially Lancaster County, and then when you get closer to the edge of our forecast area. So extreme northern and western portions of Newberry and Fairfield County, and then basically Lancaster and points north and west, particularly along the northern portion closer to the Charlotte metro area. Those areas have the greatest potential of seeing a ½ inch or more of ice. And so the most serious ice storm conditions are expected the closer you are to the upstate of South Carolina. This is what we call our reasonable worst case scenario. And you can see that the dark red has pulled down a little bit. So if you're from Greenwood to Newberry to Winnsboro to Lancaster up into Jefferson, these are the areas that are most likely to overperform from the storm. That means that the cold holds on a little bit stronger than we're thinking, and you see heavier than expected ice accumulations, which could go beyond ½ an inch. If you're in between the gray lines, so that's a good chunk of the Midlands and much of our central Savannah River area counties, you could see between a quarter and ½ an inch of ice in the worst case scenario, which of course would result in isolated power outages and difficult to maybe impossible driving conditions at times during the height of the storm. This is a table where we have some of our more populated cities within our forecast area, and the numbers within the red box are the official NWS forecast as of Saturday morning. The numbers to the left of that box are your low end or best case scenario amounts, and the ones on the right are your high end or reasonable worst case scenario. And so what does this really mean? Well, any amount of freezing rain that gets on the roads could cause some icy spots. Remember that bridges that are untreated will start to freeze over first, and then the main roads themselves. And so once we get up to around 1/10 of an inch, we're talking about the potential for some light glazes, particularly on roadways and sidewalks. And then those slick bridges and your windshield will likely start to get that coating of ice. Once we get up into the potential for an ice storm warning, we're talking about 1/4 of an inch of ice, which could result in isolated tree damage and power outages. And then it's really when it gets to about 1/2 an inch and above where we're worried about widespread outages, perhaps a little bit prolonged in terms of duration. It may take crews a while to restore power if it's lost. And then we'll see some damage to power lines and trees. Now, when you get further into the upstate, we are seeing that potential for a very destructive ice storm. For more information for that, you can visit our sister office, which is located in Greenville, Spartanburg. And this is a timeline for our specific forecast area. So as I mentioned, impacts are going to be little to none as we head into the day on Saturday. It's really where we go into Saturday night that things are going to start going downhill. So zone number 1 is Lincolnton, Georgia to Kershaw and points off to the north and west. So that's our northern and western counties is the area that we're most likely going to have issues from the freezing rain, which again could include difficult traveling. Certain roads may become difficult to move through, dangerous, and maybe even impassable at times up there. And then, of course, there is the potential for the cold and the black ice. As we move further south and east into the I-20 corridor, this is going to include you in Columbia and Augusta. We still are seeing the potential for moderate impacts, which would include slippery conditions on the roads, and then the potential for isolated power outages, a case where, again, not everyone's going to lose power. It'll just be here and there. It's impossible to say who's going to lose power, but it's something you need to prepare for. And then finally, from Waynesboro to Orangeburg to Manning, our furthest south and east counties, you're in our winter weather advisory. And so again, you could still see some slick conditions as we head into the overnight hours tonight and into the day on Sunday. And I can't rule out a power outage or two, but the impact should be much further decreased the farther south and east you go from the upstate. So as you head down towards the coastal plain, we're not as concerned. And particularly along the coast, if you want more information on that, we have offices in Charleston, South Carolina, and then Wilmington, North Carolina, as you head up towards Myrtle Beach. They'll give you the latest information for those parts of the state. One last thing I wanted to close on is that we are seeing very cold air filtering in behind the system. So unlike your traditional South Carolina storm, we aren't expecting things to just go away right away. And this may complicate recovery hazards, particularly up across the upstate. Temperatures on Monday night are expected to get down into the teens and single digits. And so we may be issuing a cold weather advisory for Monday night into Tuesday. That's something that we'll be evaluating today and probably put out sometime tomorrow when the bulk of the storm has passed. And that will summarize today's briefing. If you have any questions, you can continue to follow NWS Columbia on Facebook, X, and YouTube. Stay safe, everyone.